Soundstroke.
Welcome to today's episode of Heels in the Hierarchy with SJ
and Pegsy.
So today's Endo Awareness Month, but before that, please share, download and let everybody know in your network where we are, how to contact us, and please engage. So this month is endometriosis, I should say it right, Endometriosis Awareness Month. Did you know, for example, according to the latest survey, how long it takes the average woman who is having symptoms from the first symptom to actually getting diagnosed? Have a guess.
So the length of time from having a symptom to being diagnosed. Right. UK, 21st century, more than a quarter of the way through, 2.5 years.
So unfortunately, and it kind of quite angers me, but it is risen to an average of 9 years, 4 months. And this is up from 8 years that was reported in 2020. So actually it's getting worse and longer to be diagnosed than it was 5 years ago.
So to recap, women in pain, which is the gist of what endometriosis is, advances in technology, advances in treatment, gender equality, awareness of the difference between men's bodies and women's bodies, 21 centuries worth of development, and it's taking longer to address a problem by, my maths is bad, about 15%. So it's growing 15% a year.
And not in the right direction.
Not in the right direction.
Which is why I think it's important to understand that every year, March is always seen from Endometriosis UK as Action Month. But particularly this theme that they've got this year is called endometriosis, I can't even say it myself now, endometriosis doesn't wait, which I think is really relevant. So their slogan, if you like, from Endometriosis UK is endometriosis doesn't wait while you're trying to get a diagnosis or access care. It doesn't wait for your career, your education, your social life, or your relationships. And when I was reading that, even when I was reading it now, I got quite emotional because I'm like, that is so true from somebody who's a sufferer. It impacts every area of your life because of the pain, because of the symptoms, because of the outcomes, but also the gaslighting, the waiting, the constantly having to justify who you are. And I'm talking as a first-hand sufferer and someone who's diagnosed with endometriosis. So this is something that I'm very aware of, but also experienced of. So that's my perspective.
And I agree. One of the things that occurred to me while you were speaking, because all of those points that Endometriosis UK is talking about is 100% valid. But the other thing that occurred to me is that endometriosis occurs during the time frame when an adolescent or prepubescent female has their periods through to when they reach the menopause. And that doesn't wait either. We can't defer having your periods until you're 54 because they occur in a given time frame. So you can't defer having the biological condition, having a menstrual cycle that women have, that is in a very large proportion of people the root cause of their endometriosis. So you can't put that off, and therefore, as you say, the effect of all of the other things that are disadvantaged by having endometriosis as well.
I think the facts kind of stood out to me a little bit because I was hoping, because when I was diagnosed, it was quite later in my teens. I started going to the GP 12, 13. I got diagnosed when I was 17 and a half, which is probably around, 7 years, something like that, 6 years.
But that was 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah, so you
can't
think...
do the maths.
No, I can't do the maths. But it makes you feel
Strength
old.
in other areas,
but what
darling.
was interesting is, even then, the gynecologist, and I must say, not all gynecologists, the one I had was excellent, but it took me a long, long time to be able to be at his door. But what surprised me is even then he was sharing the story of how common it is, but how little knowledge there was about the condition. And that's what he was advocating on, which was great. But what's sad is I've seen knowing this, 20 odd years, and it's still getting worse. And what's really interesting is from the report is that endometriosis is the second most common gynecological condition there is. Now you think how many health concerns there is, and how, females in terms of things that can impact them in the whole menstrual cycle. That's a huge diagnosis that is being either misdiagnosed or taken that long to do it. And actually what was quite interesting, it's estimated that around 1.5 to 2 million women in the UK have it, which is like 1 in 10. So again, It goes back to that it's a huge proportion of our society. And again, we seem to be going backwards in accessibility, which is why it's been pushed this year as awareness is one thing, that's enough. We need to make changes. We can't have people going through agony, and it impacts every part of their lives. And obviously, a lot of what we talk about is women, work, leadership. Well, that's it. If you've got any kind of chronological pain or gynecological pain, it's going to impact all those areas, isn't it?
But also, if we've got 1 in 10 women in society struggling with endometriosis, whether or not they're people that this podcast is aimed at, which is women in management and leadership positions or not, if they're young women at school, if they're women in any role in the workplace, if they have chosen not to work while they're bringing up a family, not to work at all or whatever it is, 50% of the population roughly is women, and 1 in 10 of those women are in pain. The financial impact on society of that pain is vast. The effectiveness and efficiency, the cost of that is substantial. I mean, it's not something that affects just such a tiny minority of people not to have any effect in society at all. It's 10% of 50% of the population that it affects. Any mathematician worth their salt, it's not a strength of mine, but any mathematician or economist worth their salt would say that doesn't make economic sense.
No,
to just be aware of it, but not actually to do anything about it.
But I think this came up in our previous podcast when we talked about the menopause.
Yeah.
So that's becoming more and more a topic to discuss, and how we need to be menopause friendly.
Yeah.
Then we should be the same once the whole menstrual cycle. Our whole life cycle, really. But what I did notice is I should really explain to the listeners who don't know what endometriosis is, what it is, because I can see us going running away with all our thoughts and ideas and perspectives and frustrations, because I think this is, again, another example where I grieve for the healthcare of the people still in agony and having to advocate for themselves and having to fight for the right to be able to be heard. And it frustrates me, but actually angers me. But going back to what it is, for those who I've heard the word for the first time, it is, again, this is another gripe of mine, is why the medical profession with any kind of condition has to be so long. So having dyslexia, I'm like, oh my word, which is why it's probably shortened to endo, because it's easier. But endometriosis occurs when cells that are similar to the ones that's the lining of the womb, your uterus, are found elsewhere in the body. So these cells can grow, change in response to hormones. In the menstrual cycle, as we talked about, this can cause inflammation, pain, and scar tissue. It's mostly common found on the lining of the pelvis, and it can occur in the ovaries and other pelvic organs like the bowel or bladder. However, it has also been found on the brain, the wrist, the lungs, the other parts of the bowel. So it's really, really important to note that although they're the common places in the uterus and those areas, it can be found anywhere, such as outside of the pelvis, as even the chest, the brain, which is something that came out last year, and someone's on the wrist. So if it can grow and develop in other areas, I think this is potentially, and this is my perspective, why it can be misdiagnosed, because it's not static to one area and why potentially you're thrown to all the other areas all the time. But it does affect about 10% of women.
I think the interesting thing that you bring to our listeners' attention about the fact that it can be found anywhere in the body. I remember you and I spoke about it last year when we were sort of planning out our future episodes. And it absolutely shocked me that I was completely unaware that endometriosis could occur anywhere else. And I was shocked that it wasn't more well known. And then given that we've got 1 in 10 of 50% of the population who are struggling with this, why this additional fact was almost non-existent. And I just find that really, really shocking.
Well, my experience was it's not just the symptoms. I think this goes back to a lot of the things we've talked about in our previous episodes. It's psychological, it's emotional.
Yeah.
It impacts your relationships, it impacts your lifestyle, your friendships, your work. I mean, I've previously had to fight to keep some of my jobs due to the fact that I wasn't able to function. And I know that's unfortunately a story of a lot of women that actually they declare a diagnosis or they're fighting it to get a diagnosis to be able to demonstrate that they actually can't function. And that's something that when I see the research coming out, the research is amazing. I love the fact that they're investing in it. My kind of energy is but what now? Like what, the why, like how's it going to shift? How can people really, when am I going to see the change? And that's what's impacted me a bit seeing the report was, how's it gone backwards?
Yeah.
And I know that, in the UK, a lot of changes in the NHS and etc. has impacted it. But it frustrates me around, but it's women's health.
Yeah.
It's the same biasness that I'm seeing in the healthcare sector. And the more stories that are shared, the more awareness that's bringing up, it just seems to, it's like opening a Band-Aid. You're kind of seeing everybody in the same experiences, but you just want it to change.
But also, I mean, if we link it back to menopause, there's been some really good research and subsequent publicity about how women going through menopause are often choosing to leave the workplace because they're struggling with the symptoms of menopause. And yet the same information, the same impact must logically be happening with women with endometriosis. So in addition to the physical and emotional symptoms that they are managing and very often just getting on with it, I'm sure that there is a churn in organisations where women might not go for a promotion because the impact of them having to do a more senior job of any description while they're struggling regularly with significant amounts of pain, the concern about their own perceived lack of performance because their whole demeanour is affected by endo on a day-to-day basis. There's a whole bunch of decisions that are comparable to the decisions that women going through menopause are making. Then there's a lot of women going through roles in the workplace, changing jobs, changing even career paths, simply because of not simply because, but because of endometriosis that, again, isn't being picked up. So we can't have this. I'm not criticising anything to do with the menopause awareness. Of course not. But logically, we cannot have a focus on and education around menopause and yet be so ignorant in endo, given the impact that has, and on women who are making a financial impact in the workplace, arguably in much larger numbers.
And to add to that, I think the hardest is the misinformation and misunderstanding of it. and potentially other women not understanding who don't have it.
Yeah.
So you're going for the menstrual cycle, every single person has a different way that their body reacts or copes with and hormonally changes throughout their cycle month. So, some women can have really bad bloating or stomach cramps or no symptoms at all, or migraines, which is the natural menstrual cycle, for example. But with endometriosis, you can have women, and this is something I learned really early on with my gynecologist, which completely blew my mind. You can have somebody riddled with endometriosis that have no symptoms. It doesn't impact them at all. And you can have women who have one or two scarring things and it impacts their whole life because the way that their body attaches to it. So, and it also can change. So if I'm just share my story for a second, when I started my menstrual cycle, you don't know any different. You just kind of are trying to learn what your cycle is like. But I knew it wasn't normal to be bleeding throughout the whole night and shedding and needing to change the whole bedding because your body just was flooding and having horrendous pain that you couldn't get out of bed, and then trying to not go to school or go to college and people saying that's absolutely fine, what's wrong with you? Periods are everybody's thing. You're already getting that negative feedback loop from other professionals, so teachers, other women, people that don't necessarily have an awareness. And I didn't know there was anything there. I was trying to get information from other people that the feedback was I was being dramatic, or so you're already listening to other, instead of investigation, being curious or going, well, that's everyone's experience is different.
You're being labelled, aren't you? You've got a low pain threshold, you're a drama queen or whatever.
Yeah.
So the labelling side of things actually has started really early on.
But the silencing as well, you're not, that it happens to all of us. So get on with it. Or, everyone has them, that kind of thing. That's already before.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I had a great family unit who was like, you need to track this. Doesn't seem normal. And knowing me as an individual, that actually I wouldn't take painkillers. So that's not I wouldn't necessarily be someone that would take painkillers straight away unless I needed to. And going to the GP and then instantly, without me having to share it, they wouldn't even look at a diary that I'd written or looked at like my pattern. It was straight away, come back to me. You're too young. It's absolutely normal.
Okay.
The dismissiveness and the themes that I'm hearing from other people's stories, that is also something that I think is changing in terms of being empowered. But at the time, you're trusting that another professional, you're seeking advice from somebody.
Yeah.
You're not seeking to go into a room to be dismissed instantly. And it wasn't until I actually brought my dad along that I started seeing changes. And it's not until now I look back and go, oh, I wonder what that was about.
So things changed when you had a male at a doctor's appointment advocating for you, because up until that point, you weren't listened to.
More so outside. It was more when I went to the actual gynecologist.
Okay.
But I did notice a pattern of going, okay, I go on my own, or I go with another female, dismiss instantly, just you need to go on the pill. That's a very common one that I hear from other women. Go on hormone tablets. Oh, that's great. But what does that actually change? It's like everything else. It wasn't a choice then. It was a direction. Women should have the choice of how, the pill is used for different reasons. But that's your answer. Take the pill.
Well, that's fascinating. I remember going to the GP with really painful, heavy periods and getting put on the pill. I'm now wondering, was that a bout of endometriosis? So to your point about it affects people differently. I remember I was out party once and I was on my period and I was in pain. It was really, really awful. Just about everyone in the party dismissed me as sort of being over dramatic and attention seeking and that sort of thing. I now think that was probably endometriosis. And I've, touch wood, I've been blessed by not struggling with endometriosis through my life. So but it's interesting that it's only looking back on it now and speaking to you that I'm thinking, gosh, yeah, actually, without having significant symptoms or a potential condition that I was investigating, I got the solution to a problem that until now I didn't even realise I might have had.
Well, it's quick
Isn't that
fixes, isn't it?
fascinating? Yeah, yeah.
It's how to get you out the room quick enough
Yeah.
and still say you've given someone a solution. And the biasness, I thought, around my teenage years, oh, well, she's going to be sexually active or she may want kids. So
Of
everything's
course.
linked to fertility or sexual activity because I happen to be a woman with a womb.
Yeah.
It wasn't, let's investigate this, what you're sharing sounds quite difficult. There was no curiosity. It was, this is normal, go and do something about it. You either want the pill or you're going to have to put up with it or have kids.
And women get told to have babies as a
All the
way
time.
of dealing with the symptoms of endo, don't they?
But that's also a massive trigger. So if you can't have children or endometriosis has impacted you in some way and you can't have them or it's
Or
difficulty,
don't want them.
or everything's a choice. So this is the other issue is other people's perspectives, other people's then opinions on shutting down or not understanding or not having empathy or just trying to do a quick fix. Not enough research or curiosity to have investigations. So the very, very, my experience was took me years to try to even get into the room to have a conversation with a consultant. And even then it was right, let's try everything around hormonal changes and drugs. Now, if you're somebody who don't want to be taking drugs, and why should we?
Mm-hmm.
We want to know what the problem is. We don't want to be dosed up on painkillers.
Which is masking things.
Everything's masking. Or, right, we're going to try this. To be able to get a diagnosis, there's so many different things that you have to go. So in terms of our listeners, so there's 4 main types of endometriosis, which is one's the peritoneal, which I can't say very much. It's basically the pelvis. So endometriosis there is the lining, the inner surface of the pelvis. There's the ovarian, which is when the cysts are found on the ovaries.
Right.
And then the deep endometriosis, which is found in the bladder, the bowel, or the rectovaginal tissue area. I think what's interesting when I was looking back and the extra pelvic is found on the outside of the pelvis. What I realised is that actually when I've had a few operations, but my endometriosis changed. So I'd find it on the lining of my womb. Then actually it was the Douglas, which is just outside the womb. But then actually when another operation, it fused to my bowel.
Right.
And so then they found there's no floating bits. So it shifts all the time, which I think looking back, the reason why sometimes their quick fixes about taking the pill is if they shift you not having periods, that takes the problem away.
Right.
Because the endometriosis lining then replicates as you bleed. However, if you think about it that you're from the science we talked about that it can go anywhere.
That's what I was going to say.
That doesn't shift anything.
Yeah.
So you can have these medications to say stop taking that, but as you know, same as what we talked about the menopause, what you still have other symptoms. So it's not necessarily shifting or changing anything. You just don't happen to bleed.
Yeah.
So this is the biggest fight around. Let's have the right choices for women of what is right for them. And actually do a proper investigation rather than going for years of dismissing them with painkillers or tablets, or come back to me when you've done another diary. I mean, the amount of diary entries I had to do about your menstrual cycle. But for those who've got endometriosis not in their pelvis, what happens to them?
Yeah.
Right. So it gets dismissed completely. And so that's the shift, is just being open-minded a little bit around what that looks like.
I mean, we'll put the definitions of the 4 different types of endo in the show notes at the bottom of them. But I think it is fascinating, as you say, it is expedient to give somebody a tablet with any conditions, and with awareness that GPs are under a huge amount of time pressure. So you do probably default to quick fix diagnoses and prescriptions in its broadest sense of the word, so that you meet all of the other patients that you're sort of committed to meeting. But you've got 4 different types of endometriosis, which will present differently to all women. You've got the potential to have a treatment that masks It deals with an effect, but not with the cause. But also, given that endometriosis, we now know, does not stay put in one area, the treatment that is being fairly swiftly suggested, and not necessarily so swiftly suggested, but perhaps with long-term implications in terms of
course,
have a baby,
yeah,
that you're actually treating the symptom in one specific area of the body, and yet the cause of the problem can affect you anywhere in the body.
Well, on the back of that, when you think about when you finally get through the room and get how you even get a diagnosis. So what was interesting in it with fighting for it and trying to say, please, can you just do something? They do like an investigation. So the first one's examination.
Yeah.
So where do they examine? Through the vagina.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, the indignity.
And I remember there was about, it was so many months in a row where I spent in A&E because I either couldn't stop bleeding or I couldn't walk, and parents were like, this is absolutely ridiculous. We cannot do this. And having all the doctors around me
as a young
female,
teenager. Yeah.
Just looking at my part, I think it got to this point where I was just so, what's the word? Just so blinded to it. You're like, fine. But looking back at it, going, where's the dignity?
Absolutely.
You know, where's the empathy of understanding? You're just an object, and young and female and vulnerable, and how receptive you are of just wanting help. But instead, you know, the amount of times I was just given morphine, again, painkillers, wait till she gets in their pain and then send her away. That isn't helping someone. That's just kind of getting them addicted to opioids in a sense. You know, you're enabling people just to do that because they've got no other options. But what was interesting is after the examinations, the ultrasound, and then you've got the MRI, and then you get to be able to have, if you're fortunate, the laparoscopy.
Yeah.
For me to get to the laparoscopy stage, nothing came up on my ultrasound, nothing came up on my MRI because it was in the Douglas. So of course it wouldn't. So even the treatments they're still doing today doesn't pick up everything. So that whole sense of feeling that you're going mad because you're being told, fine, we'll do this, but it's not found. As soon as you're pushing, the amount of effort to be pushed to be able to find something and it's not there, knowing your own body, knowing that something's still not right, but then getting that signals back from the professional of wanting to send you away. I remember the moment when we had the laparoscopy, because I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not. It was my dad at this time. He was just like, I'm not leaving here until she has something, because we'd gone through so much and it was still happening. And when I came out of the operation and he confirmed that they found it and this is what it looked like, he went through it and just breaking down with joy, which is weird to say, but knowing that you weren't mad, of going, I've been fighting this, telling you that something wasn't right, and saying like how much of it. And within 18 months, I had to go in for 2 laparoscopies because they'd scraped it out and it came straight back, and then they had to laser it, and it still was. So it's not like it's a curable. I think this is another really important fact. Even with those interventions, it's not curable. There's no cure for endometriosis, which is why another reason I believe that they try and push the hormonal.
Yeah.
Because they think that, you know, I mean, like, if you just choose not to have children, that's what they always talk about.
Well, it's interesting. So bringing back to a situation that I am familiar with. So there's somebody that I'm very close to who has been struggling to get a diagnosis for what is probably going to turn out to be endometriosis. They were advised to have a baby because that would cure the endometriosis. Yeah. They've had a family. That family brings them tremendous joy. They've had MRIs, they've had CT scans, they've had a laparoscopy. After the family has been complete, they are continuing to have pain, which we believe to be endo pain. They've asked a female gynecologist if they can have another laparoscopy, and the gynecologist turned round and said, well, you had one 10 years ago, so we really don't recommend that you have another one. And this friend of mine turned round and said, what do you think the side effects are going to be then? And am I going to be left in crippling abdominal pain for the next 10 years? And then gave this kind of really sort of savage laugh because they were concerned about the risk of repeating a 10-year-old operation. News alert, things may well have changed in her body after she's had a family. But also, she's been in crippling pain for 10 years. So what is the side effect going to be?
And
And it's just...
it's so frustrating and laughable at the same
Yeah.
time that we've talked about it so many times in different versions that even in this century, there's so much still that we think we've come so far and everything's equal. And when you hear people's stories, you go, what is going on? Nothing has shifted. If that's the same reaction that I got 20 odd years ago, the medical profession with all their research haven't done enough to recognise that everyone is unique, the way that their body produces. And I'm not criticising doctors and gynecologists. I can't comprehend the amount of pressure they must be in individually. But the system to be able to still think that using the same form for every person is going to work, where, like you say, even if you've got people who can't have children or choose not to because of endometriosis, you've got people who have children but the symptoms still come back. So there's so much research out there, but it's still not shifting the treatment plan.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing every single time. And if you've got somebody that you're working with or supporting and you're noticing that they're struggling, you've got to understand the impact of the symptoms of being in chronic pain all the time. You don't want to be on painkillers all the time. You'll try everything. So if someone's coming to you, it's not because they are being weak or can't take the pain. Is you've got to understand what pain does to somebody when you're crippled. It weakens you, it makes you grumpy, you're tired, you can't sleep, your body changes. Not only do you get bloating, but you get irradical, it's psychological as well as everything else, because you're constantly being, what's the word, not necessarily always gaslighted, but I've been absolutely gaslighted by the doctors before. And everything around you, it seems to be working, and your own body is working against you.
But it's a chronic condition. So if we say that the time frame could be from, let's say, from when you're 40 to arbitrarily 64, 50, 54, let's say 54, when you start your menopause, that is a 40-year period when that individual could be in chronic pain. Now, if you've got a lot of other medical conditions that you say is going to blight somebody's life for 4 decades, that would get an awful lot of publicity. And yet, because it's women, because it's gynecological, and because it's pain, it's just not getting the traction and the focus.
It's unseen pain again, isn't it? It goes back to when we talked about mental health awareness. It's something you can't see, so therefore it's not... It's ridiculous that it's still in that kind of state, isn't it? That, we can't see it, but don't worry, you're taking days off sick, you're fatigued, you're exhausted, you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well. If you went to all of those other things to anyone else, would be like, well, something's not right. But because you're the one who's going, actually, let's par that with your menstrual cycle. Well, that's the problem then, isn't it?
And also, if we think about this in a people management context, and the fact that talking about periods, menstrual cycle, and even pain is quite a bit of a taboo for women, how many women have gone through performance management or disciplinary processes, perhaps even being dismissed or settled out of an organisation because of the impact of a chronic condition that they could suffer for 40 years? How many people has that affected? And again, the impact on the economy and organisational performance and effectiveness.
And unfortunately, the downside is that those who don't struggle or understand or see endometriosis, other women, they can also, unfortunately, then hinder your performance at work. So if they don't struggle, a bit like, well, I don't have that, so why should you? It's almost that ignorance to it, where after a while, it's doesn't matter how much you're advocating and talk about it, the sympathy kind of goes
wears
over
thin
time.
after a while,
Because
doesn't
you
it?
still need to do that. But actually women who are saying, well, I need flexible working.
Yeah.
We've got menopause friendly employers.
Yeah.
Endometriosis UK advocates, and they have a endometriosis friendly employer program that they
Brilliant.
and Anton from Strictly Come Dancing, his
Anton
wife
Beck.
has just become, with his wife, a big advocate for Endometriosis
Oh,
UK, because his
wonderful.
wife just shared her story and how it's impacted her, and they've really been advocating this
Brilliant.
endometriosis friendly employer. But it's taking this long.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
taking this long, and it has to be a celebrity to make it valid. It makes me feel, great, brilliant, because it brings the press and understanding it. And, if you could be an employer who just naturally understood your employees again and was able to go, right, how can I help you? You're more likely to get that longevity with your staff member. You're going to be able to have open conversations. You're going to be able to work with them in a way that you still get the work done, but you're going to have to just adjust to certain areas and times of the month when that's going to be a flare-up. And that's the other thing. You don't know when a flare-up's going to happen.
Yes.
And it's not always going to be in your menstrual time of the month. So having that open conversation is about being honest and saying, how can we help you? What do I need to know? How can we work together? And actually, because that's how you're going to get the best out of your employee, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I strongly believe if you create the right environment for good workforce outcomes, individual employees will perform to a level that is of significant benefit to an organisation, simply because the level of discretionary effort that they put into their role is so much higher, because they know that they are being supported by the organisation, that their employer is an empathetic employer who wants to get the best out of all of their employees, and the clock watching and the data drivers of employment are deprioritized in preference to employee engagement and the individualized support of every employee.
It's interesting, because I do feel that in some ways we are a bit like menopause. I almost got to the end of the line of, I'm fed up of having to keep doing this. So there's more voices now. People are getting more louder as a collective, which is great, in the community. And I think my experience has been both great and also poor in the workplace. I'm a lot more vocal around, look, I'm dyslexic and I also have endometriosis. This is what it looks like, but this is my performance. I'm more empowered to share what my skill setting, but also this doesn't necessarily impact my work, but it may in this situation. And I'm a lot more aware when I'm working with people about, okay, what's your policy on how do you work flexibly around, because it is a disability at the end of the day. How do you work with that?
It meets the threshold.
And I absolutely always talk about, this is a disability under the Disability Act, how, and trying to protect yourself right from the offset. So it's not something that's going to come back, but also it's a two-way street of being, if you've been silenced or gaslighted or dismissed for so many years, if you're thinking from the first symptom to like averagely, let's say 9.5 years, that's exhausting work. It's exhausting to be in pain. It's exhausting not to be able to function as you want to. If you've got children, not being able to do what you need to do, not able to work around, you've got all those kind of feelings. If you can't have children because of it, that's a whole other psychological, emotional side. If it's impacting your work or even your relationships or even your sex life because you can't, because pain is too much, that's your whole identity starts to be crumbled away. And it's not necessarily viewed as something that people want or feel that's appealing to work with. But if you just take a minute of understanding that if somebody came with a different disability and you're saying, actually, we are a flexible employer, we work within Disability Act, you would have them sit down, have a conversation, and you would make adjustments. It's exactly the same. However, my experience has, and the stories that I've heard, is that's not the case. And I wonder, again, I can't help but wonder, is when is this bias going to stop?
Yeah.
Because it's a woman presenting this.
Yeah.
And it's something that is misunderstood, or because I happen to have a womb, or I happen to be voicing. And the medical profession and symptom management and what's available, just because it's incurable, doesn't mean you give up. You know?
Yeah, because you're giving up on 10% of 50% of the population. So again, economically, it does not make sense, whether that's at an organisational level or a countrywide level, because women contribute to the economy in a variety of ways. I also wonder if it's on the increase, if endo is on the increase, because talking about this friend that I was referencing earlier on, within her friendship group of her 5 closest friends, every single one of them has had some form of endometriosis challenge throughout their lives. Some have had families and have not had any symptoms. Some continue to struggle. One has ended up having a full hysterectomy and can never have children. And of course, the irony that that individual is the one who, throughout her entire life, knew that she was destined to be a mother. So the emotional trauma of having that opportunity taken away from her at such a young age, that is a huge amount to deal with.
Yeah.
So in a group of 6 women, for every single one of them to have endo in some form or another, and then the effect of endo on each of them individually is vast.
It's incredible, but also not surprising. I think partly because, some of the research recently is that they've found a link. I think 90% of those who have endometriosis is linked genetically to someone else in their family, like previous generations, or it's skipped a generation. And obviously, there was certain things in the previous generation that was never discovered or talked about medically. So therefore, it's not surprising that as the medical profession has, in some ways, brought awareness to different ones, then it's becoming more aware and people are talking about it. It doesn't change the treatment. It doesn't change the way that people are treated. But I'm not surprised that it's a bit that more people are identifying.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I'm not sure that it's necessarily increasing in number, but I think the increase in the numbers is because we've got more people identifying with the symptoms, because more people are prepared to talk about the symptoms and the challenges and those sorts of things.
But exactly, because it does cross over on every part of their lives.
Yeah.
It's not something that just happens to be that time of the month. It's not like that. I think this is the misunderstanding. But there's so much more, and I'd encourage people just to be a bit more curious and be more aware that just because you're not suffering yourself does not mean that there is that huge mask in the other person in your room or in your colleagues that is going through something. And if they've been silenced enough, it may be an opportunity, or they may have decided not to share it. And there's always something behind a story if they're struggling, or pain looks in different ways, isn't it? Suffering presents in different ways. People's behaviours are in different ways. And it does make me think about, as a woman, as a leader, to again come back to being courageous to have those conversations.
You've nicked my question.
Did I?
I've got this. I was framing my question.
Oh, you see, we're just too aligned.
So my question to you was going to be, as a woman who has experienced endometriosis from early teenagehood through to still experiencing endo now, and as a leader who likes to role model the behaviours you would like to see in other leaders in all sorts of ways, if you're talking to either a male or female leader, whether they struggle with endo or don't, what advice would you give to them to help them to be curious about endo, to support work colleagues with endometriosis and any other insights that you think would be really valuable to our Heels in the Hierarchy listeners?
Well, I think apart from what I just shared, I think the two things is if you're in an organisation who has HR and occupational health, they'd have some information. But if you're line managing people, I think it's our role to at least invite the conversation. Similar to what we talked about in the menopause, they may not share, but you want to be empowered enough to be able to have a courageous conversation by saying, is there anything that you may find that I need to know about you? So when I'm talking about, when you're doing your wellbeing checks, you're doing your one-to-ones, you're talking about work performance, but you're also doing a bit of a general wellbeing check of how you're doing, what's happening, is there anything that I need to be aware of, how are you doing emotionally, or is there anything physically I need to know about? They're open opportunities, isn't it? I'm very more mirrors because I will share quite openly with the team. I'm just struggling today, partly because sometimes I'm rubbish at masking. I can't hide pain.
Mm-hmm.
Often, sometimes it's because they generally, I got to stand up and go, right, I just have to give a minute because I'm ovulating really badly, or they're having really bad pain, or I'm just going to wait because I just don't need to be uncomfortable.
Wait for this pain to pass. Yeah.
Or I'm desperate to go to the toilet, but I'm waiting for my whole team to go because I'm just struggling. I think that if you're mirroring the permission to be vulnerable as a leader, I think that's my key.
Yeah.
Is that it's not about probing into someone else's life. It's saying I'm okay and comfortable with my own self.
And it's creating a trust-based environment. And we've spoken about that in any number of contexts where, as you say, people trust enough to have the confidence to sometimes raise issues and concerns with their line manager that involve a degree of exposure, of honesty, of vulnerability themselves to share with their employer. Because this hierarchical, I am a manager, you are my employee, and we have to behave in entirely different ways is such a thing of the past. If you've got a trust-based relationship, then it doesn't matter what job title you've got. Yeah. It's about being the best human being you can be in that working relationship.
I also feel like it has to come from a respect area.
Yeah.
So, there's many people out there be like, I can't stand my manager, I'll never talk to her. That's fine. But there's other opportunities. I think that we all have accountability for our own behaviour, regardless if you're a leader or not. You can still be human with somebody else. Just because you don't struggle with endometriosis, or you've never had issues with your menstrual cycle, I'm very jealous, but that's great. But have empathy and understanding that for other women, that's not their experience. That's not what they are going through. And often a lot of pain is silent pain.
Yeah.
And actually, if you can, as a leader, give opportunities for voice, being able to be very vocal around discussing topics that people may find, oh, wow, I didn't realise we had permission to talk about it. You're enabling to know your team. If that is something you're feeling comfortable with, then what's quite nice in organisations, often they have an organisational development team, or they've got areas where they invite networks, and they have various women's networks, or they have awareness months. And generally speaking, most organisations have that.
Yeah.
And so something that I've always gone into when I'm talking to other leaders is, what do you have available to celebrate women, or what do you have around the awareness month? And often it's we do the National Women's Day,
International Women's Day. Yeah.
And I said, are you a friendly menopause awareness company? And some people say yes, and that's fantastic. So I said, well, actually, it's the whole cycle. So what else is there? And I think that's it's the awareness bit of going, did you know there's awareness? And what's quite nice is that organisations love to advertise how friendly they are. It's a great PR.
Yeah,
it's great for that.
And, if that's the way we leverage it,
and
then
unfortunately,
so be it.
that's going, actually, did you know you could be an endometriosis friendly employer?
Yeah.
And that is something that you partner with the organisation. You're able to kind of speak, and people are more likely to go, oh, that's a really good, I like that. I didn't understand that. So you can still be an advocate for something, as we are for every other thing, to make sure that it's something that's sustainable for the organisation.
I think also it's really important to highlight widely that endometriosis is not a woman's issue. It's actually a society's issue. Every man is aware of a woman in their life, whether they're married, single, whether they've got female siblings. This is not a male environment where once in a blue moon there's a woman around.
What's interesting when you're saying that is the amount of husbands or partners are coming forward to say, similar to when we talked about the menopause, is what is going on? I'm seeing her in pain. Can anyone explain it to me?
Yeah.
And that's it's not all doom and gloom. It's the fact that there's a lot of loving men out there for their partners, wanting to support them. I suppose for me, the factor that's missing is not enough financial input to make the difference into changing the timeframes quick enough.
Yeah.
So the funding needs to be there. But what we're able to want to do, and I want to make it really clear, I have no association with Endometriosis UK. I've talked about them quite a lot, mainly because they do fantastic information. The only charity in the UK that really advocates for it, hence the title. But they have webinars. They have consultants. They partner with hospitals and consultants and gynecologists that have the right research. That's endometriosis.org, which is more of a national organisation. But there's information out there.
Yeah.
And that does its power. But it doesn't mean that as a woman in leadership or in workways, we become ignorant because it's not something that we have to deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's the point.
Yeah.
Is the reason why we're talking about it, not just because it's Awareness Month, because we've talked about menopause and everyone seems to be more aware of that and can identify it. Now it's also brings spotlight of going, but there's other things that we need to change. We want to be able to see more employers becoming friendly employers around the whole of the women's gynecological issues. And when it's incurable and people are struggling and they're suffering, then we should be able to be in a place to offer opportunities for them to still be able to work. Because I think when you're not able to contribute, it does impact you in a negative way. And I want to be able to see that needle shift around people giving more opportunities, more discussions, more flexibility in being able to feel that you're still able to support your staff member.
SJ, I'd really like to appreciate the graciousness with which you have spoken about your condition, about how you have shared your knowledge, and about how much you advocate for women struggling with endometriosis, but also the common sense advice that you're giving to people managers and to work colleagues that is just so vital. So I really genuinely appreciate the openness that you've brought to this discussion.
Oh, thanks, Pegsy.
That's all right.
And as always, we'd love for our listeners to share, discuss, download, and inform other people from our discussion. Let it be a platform for other people to go, oh, that's interesting, let us discuss it more. Or what's your opinion? What's your experience? Do engage, do share your stories with us. We'd love to be able to have another discussion where we can kind of share more stories and explain that. So I really enjoyed being able to share and be able to hopefully bring a bit more light into the debate, the discussion, and until next time, keep your head high
and your standards higher. Oh, well done, Rita.
Thank you, honey.
That was, I know that's a difficult subject to talk about, but genuinely, you